Welcome to the Blind Apex Podcast, where amateur club racers tune in to get faster.
I'm your host, Con John Turk, and on this episode of the Blind Apex Podcast, we're talking karts. And not the carts that you drive around at the beach on vacation. Joining me, proud dad, wakeboard nerd, NASA announcer and racer, reformed DSM driver, DJ Fitzpatrick. Welcome to the show, man.
Thank you, Con. I was looking forward to this. I even like the term blind apex from my history of racing. Those are my favorite corners. So really looking forward to expanding upon that and talking about my introduction to karting, which is brief in the past couple of years, but I've learned a lot.
Yeah. Just for full clarity, you and I are both I don't know how we say it, members of Madison Motorsports. We went to the university, James Madison University, and that's how we know each other. And we both run in the Mid-Atlantic region. So, DJ, give us your background on your racing. Exactly. What are you racing these days?
So, I'm 36 years old at this point, and I've been doing some sort of motorsports competition since I was 17. So about 19 years. I was a member of, the Fast and Furious fan club in high school, basically. I had a Mitsubishi Eclipse non-turbo automatic, which I thought was amazing at the time. And a friend with some friends wanted to take me to an autocross, and I went to it for the first time and I fell in love. And from then on, I spent the next 4 to 5 years from 17 to basically 22, 23, doing about 30 odd automotive events a year, mostly in autocross because that's what I could afford at the time. And I got introduced to Madison Motorsports through JMU when I joined, and they got me down the path of big track racing. So I joined up with Madison Motorsports. We have a very tight connection with NASA Mid-Atlantic, which I believe you've interviewed with both Chris Cabetto and his son with NASA Mid-Atlantic, and that close-knit tie with Madison Motorsports. I started racing after I got out of college. That's really when, you have a bit more disposable income. I did well in both time trial and racing. I stuck mostly with BMWs because I do like to tinker. And this is kind of where you'll see also moving into karting is I just like working on things. And so I was drawn to the builder classes with my own racing, German touring series. I ran an E36 for a very long time, was very successful in that, and ran Spec E46, Spec Miata for a very brief time. And, we can kind of go into a little bit later, Spec Miata and karting, because a lot of people draw parallels with Spec Miata and karting. And I'd like to dispel a couple things. I think people closely relate those too much, and I'll explain a little bit later why. But I had my two boys right as I got into Spec Miata, and the the idea was that I would be working on the car less versus a builder series, but the body shop work was a lot more. And so I took a brief recluse from that, and here I am about 3-4 years later, and I bought another race car, and that will I will be back out on the yes, another BMW, a builder class again. Yet, despite having a 4 and 6-year-old,
that'll be okay. You've been training them to use the jacks and all that stuff, so they'll be pit crew in no time. It'll be easy.
Yeah, it's amazing how we can be so passionate about a motorsport and your kid doesn't care.
Well, I mean, at least Eli cares, right? He's karting these days, so he's sort of, maybe he doesn't care about what you're doing, but he wants to do it himself, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So my oldest son, really, the karting starts. I moved down to Mooresville, North Carolina, about 6 years ago. Race City, USA,
NASCAR country,
and they have a facility. Yeah, and they have Race City. I'm sorry, they have a facility called GoPro Motorplex, which is now known as Trackhouse Motorplex, which is actually one of the premier outdoor go-kart facilities in the U.S. They host national events there for karting as well. So you've got a mix of what we call owner karts. That is, you own your own kart, you run your own kart, and rental karts. And so I kind of got exposed to that by running a couple rental leagues. And, I, as a motorsports enthusiast and driver, got used to rental karts. You show up to your local small rental track, and you can get pretty close to top time of the week, top time of the month, first time out there. And I went to my first rental league at Trackhouse Motorplex, and I qualified 18th out of 22. So it was a rude awakening. And it spirals into the very depth of karting is a very different sport than car racing itself. And so that was a rude awakening. And I did that for about 2-3 years. And I grew camaraderie, just like any type of racing. You make a bunch of friends, and it's a lot of fun. And so I started to get good at rental leagues. But at the end of the day, you're exposed to a lot more inconsistencies in the field. As with any sport, as a driver, you want to level the playing field so that your driving is doing the talking.
Right.
In those rental karts, you could run into a kart that was 2 to 3 seconds a lap slower. I was doing a rental enduro with some friends, and so how they set up these rental enduros is you have to pit stop for karts, and sometimes they break up the enduros where they have a 2-hour section, then another 2-hour section, and then another 2-hour section. Mm-hmm. And so we were up an entire lap, and we caught a bad kart. And you know what? That's the luck of the draw. That kart was 3 seconds a lap slower than our previous kart, and we just struggled. Our main goal during those 2 hours was to stay on the lead lap.
Are you rotating? So like the 2 hours was over, and then you go to the kart behind you, or random draw, and then you guys manage your driver lineup, but they're handing out the karts, right? Is that the way I understand it?
Yeah. Yeah, so these rental enduros, they run a couple different ways, but this one was 2-hour stints in terms of that was the kart that you had to run for 2 hours. Okay. We rotated between our drivers, as you said. Anybody that's been in a kart knows how physically intense rental kart racing in general is. And Colin, I believe you've ran a couple, rental kart enduros with Madison Motorsports itself. And, you're pretty wiped after 10, 20 minutes in a kart if you're not used to it.
Oh, absolutely. So I was exposed to karts when I was a teenager. I had an exchange student from Brazil stay with us for several years. And then finally I went to go visit them. And our exchange student's fiance, now husband, raced karts in Brazil. So in Brazil, you either play soccer or race cars. Those are their two national sports. And he just threw me in his backup kart back then. And it was essentially like a rental because I wasn't doing anything. I would put my suit and helmet on and drive. That was it.
Everywhere else in the world, karting is just so much more of a mainstay than here in the U.S. The U.S. is getting a larger karting interest. The sport is growing.
Right.
Despite the end of motorsports is nigh with electric cars. Karting is growing. F1 has renewed some interest in it, and the fields seem to be getting bigger. And unfortunately, so does the cost. We'll get into that, but
great.
This F1 boom is actually really showing some interest in the sport.
Yeah. So you've done rentals. I'm assuming since you like builder grade race cars, like to build your own and builder classes, you own your own kart now?
Yeah. So, 2-3 years of running a rental kart, and you start talking to other people, and most of these guys that are running these really tough rental leagues also own their own karts. So they're kind of just doing these rental leagues to fill in the blanks here on weekdays. And I picked up a kart that was used from a friend and tried it out. And I thought I was high on life. My first day testing Friday went really well. My times were super competitive. I thought, okay, here we go. First time in these, I'm going to be able to at least be more competitive than I was the first time in rental karts.
Right.
And then everybody throws on new tires and puts on their setup, and you realize you're at the back of the pack.
For people who don't know, DJ's generally considered pretty fast. So when he's in the back, he's probably not very happy.
So, one of the things I learned was how physically intense owner karts are. And the best way to illustrate this to somebody is there's a turn at Trackhouse Motorplex called Turn 4. And it's a very long 180-degree sweeper. And these karts only weigh about 150 to 170 pounds themselves.
Okay.
For perspective, a rental kart runs between 350 and 500 pounds.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So you're talking about a cart. Yeah. So you're talking about a cart 200, 300, 400 pounds less than what you're doing at your little, at a local rental kart track. Right. And then you've got significantly more grippy tires. And so around this turn 4 long sweeper, you can do a sustained almost 2 Gs all the way around the sweeper. And it's lasting for multiple seconds. And it wiped me. And I was exhausted on Friday. And by Saturday that came around to actually qualify and race, I had no body left in me. My muscles were spent. I was gripping the wheel like I was my first time in a race car.
Yeah, gorilla hands, man.
Oh, absolutely. And much to my wife's chagrin, they had to pull me out of the cart at the end of the race. I could not physically get out of the cart at the end of the race. And so I pushed myself a little too far, too fast on that one. So a little advice to anybody getting into these karts is give yourself a couple days between your first practice and your first race. You're going to need time to recover. And so that was my introduction. And I actually took a step back from owner karts at that point because I had to stay in bed for the next 3 days. Oh, wow. And I worked from bed for the next 3 days. And my wife was not happy at all, taking care of kids and everything. But at the end of the day, racing, you have to have supportive people around you. And the one thing I can say is my wife is extremely supportive. So despite my setback about 2.5 years ago, here I am doing owner kart racing in what's called Briggs to LO206. What is LO206? So this is basically a motor created by Briggs and Stratton. Yes, that
lawnmower
one that powers all your lawnmowers. Yeah. Yes. Maybe you have a fancy weed whacker. Yeah, Briggs and Stratton. Those motors are what powers my owner kart. It's considered the introduction into owner carts. And I hate to say introduction because some of the best racing will happen in LO206. It's about an 8 to 9 horsepower, depending on what you believe from some of these engine builders. Mm-hmm. And there are engine builders. Talk about Spec Miata. There is a link there. You've got low horsepower motor being built and a lot of money being spent into these motors to make another 0.3, 0.4, 0.5 horsepower. Not quite the maybe 1 horsepower some claim, but at the end of the day, it produces pretty even racing once you buy into it. And the high grip with these karts being so low weight makes it a monstrous challenge. And that's where I am currently. I've run a LO206, and then there's about, the interesting thing about owner kart racing is there is a motor for everyone in there. We have everything from, what you would consider the slower class, which is that Briggs LO206, to you have KA motors and X30 motors. And this is specifically referencing my local track house. Europe has much different motors as well, KZ motors. But what you will find in karting in the US is really a split between these Briggs motors, mm-hmm. which are also can be converted to call Predator motors, and they all make 8 to 10 horsepower, and they're all 4 strokes. And then you have what's called the 2 strokes. And, the name implies they're 2 strokes. And you have your major players. You have Rotax, IAME. Those are the 2 big players in the US. You have a couple more in Europe that are smaller. But typically IAME and Rotax really dominate the market. And those can make anywhere from K makes about 20, 22 horsepower to, hotted up X30s, 30 to 35 horsepower. And then even above that, you're talking about shifter karts here. Yeah. That, you can go as high as you want if you really want to go crazy. I will say that, even the X30, which is not a shifter kart, has about the same horsepower to weight ratio as a C6 Z06, which is, a 500 wheel horsepower, 3,200 pound car. So they boogie. And if you're on something that weighs, they're a little bit heavier, they're, 170, 190 pounds. You're on something that weighs 170, 190 pounds. It's making, 30 to 35 horsepower. And it's mind defying the first couple of times in one of those.
Yeah, and no suspension. So it's tires and your body absorb those G forces, right?
Yeah, and I will say that is the safety aspect of karting is quite interesting. Yeah, if you jump into a rental cart, you've got a 4-point harness and you're all strapped in. All these owner carts, there are no seatbelts. Right. There are no safety devices. Really, at the end of the day, you're talking about some armor for your vest and your back that protect your ribs. Mm-hmm. And most of that protection for your ribs is really a lot of G forces and side to side contact. It's not really made for, if you go flying out of a cart or go upside down. And as an outsider to karting in the beginning, upside down kart sounds absolutely insane. It happens. Yeah. It happens more than I would have expected.
I mean, I see those videos, where they have the crash and they're upside down or in a barrier or 2 guys get tangled and, they're flying in 2 different directions and their karts are chasing them in the air. And I'm like, man, that's gotta hurt.
Yeah, one of my friends that introduced me to owner kart racing, he was coming out of that turn four, that long sweeper I was talking about at Trackhouse, and he just got caught up with someone. He got flung upside down on top of the barriers, and this is in that Briggs, the low horsepower, 8 to 9 horsepower class. So it can happen in any of them, and in fact, for parents looking at karting as an avenue, as a sport, which I fully suggest, and I'll get into this in a little bit. But one of our first races, there was a kid kart that ended up on top of the child at the end of the day, and we're talking kid karts 5 to 7 years old. So it can be a very dangerous sport even at a very early age.
I mean, they're not. Are they technically open wheel? I mean, they're semi-covered. They're open on the top, right? Because you have bumpers and...
Yeah, I mean, you have to kind of consider it almost... The owner carts are almost open wheel. We've got these little side pods with plastic. The front bumpers are plastic. But yeah, that's what causes those flips and being upside down is... And big changes in movement of kart is when those tires contact and it just throws the kart. And so, you look at, F1 and you see, a little side to side contact in these closed wheels, closed tin top cars that's part of racing. That can turn pretty dangerous quickly in karting, but enough of the danger aspect. It is exhilarating. In an X30 at Trackhouse, you're doing 72, 74 miles per hour down that back straight, half an inch from the ground, because ground clearance is non-existent on these karts. And you're going to learn everything from the low horsepower classes where it's really about conserving momentum and freeing up a kart, to an X30 and higher horsepower karts where you can light up the tires at will mid corner, and you're talking about so much grip in these karts, and you're still able to light up the tires, mid corner all the way to exit, pulling very high G forces. So it's absolutely a lot of fun.
Yeah. So before we get too deep into the fun, and not to be the scary safety thing, but what are you wearing and what equipment when you go to an owner kart are you going to buy for yourself?
So I will have to plug OG Racing here. They supplied me my safety equipment for 20 years now, basically. Yep. Ever since I was even 17 and had to get my first helmet. They've equipped me for karting as well. So you've got your helmet, your single most important part of your body, right, is your helmet. So I always encourage people, get the nicest helmet that you can afford. If it's, those fancy gloves with names on it, or getting a higher end helmet, get a higher end helmet. It is worth every penny. And that's what really matters at the end of the day. And with karting as well is what you don't realize when you're in a loud race car and in karting is just how much damage you're doing to your ears. I have to laugh is I owned an RX-7 Champ Car team with some friends, and I went out with my lower end Bell helmet. Nothing wrong with Bell. They have very good high end helmets as well. But I bought a $250 helmet, as with most people who just get started in the sport. And my ears were ringing for 2 to 3 days after that event.
You don't wear earplugs?
And that was really bad. I do not. And so I'll tell you why is I switched to a helmet that has built-in ear cups. So I'm currently running a Stilo, and I can't suggest them enough. OG Racing carries Stilo as well now, and they have built-in ear cups which dramatically reduce the noise. And I found earplugs when you're throwing on your helmet, even with a baklava on top, and you're still just it can pop out during a race. It works itself loose. You have weird ears. Maybe that's my problem. But ear cups just work every time. You slide them over and they cut out the noise immensely. So that's my big plug right now for expensive helmets is get something that's going to protect your hearing and your noggin, because that's really the most important piece at the end of the day.
For karts and race cars.
Yeah, Con, what helmet do you run?
That $250 Bell, and I run earplugs because my car revs to 9,000 and does not have a muffler. So,
yes, well, I will still plug away and say, look at a higher end helmet. They hold up longer too as well. When I first got my helmet, I paid $1,000 for that Stilo. That credit card burned real hot right then that month. But you know what is I've had mine for almost 7 years now, and the fabric isn't falling out. The fabric is still perfect. The cups still work. There's a little bit of cracking around the rubber on the cups. But I use this for both racing and kart racing, or car racing and kart racing. So I can't fault it at all. It has been through an immense amount. And my Bell cheap helmet, it's starting to lose, its padding around the 2-3 year mark. And, I used it pretty, as I said, 30 some odd events a year I was doing. And, the Stilo is holding up longer. So really in effectiveness, it's not costing me much more.
Yeah, I think I'm on my second one. So, now you're talking 500 in, and, who knows? We still have a couple more years before they go bad. Is it going to be 2025 before they go bad? So,
yeah, it's always a year after that too, right?
So, yeah.
2026.
Yeah, 2026. It might be. I might have to spend $750, in $250 helmets. At that point, it does make sense to probably buy a more expensive one. But I was just trying to make comp school, and so I went down the cheap route. So
exactly, and that's there's nothing wrong with it. But after you've gone through that first point, I highly suggest. You won't regret it. Every time I've been able to upsell somebody on one of these, you'd think I have stock in helmet company is how much I push the higher end helmets. Is just protect your ears, protect your noggin, and then your helmet or your neck, right? Mm-hmm. So I started with a foam neck brace on both me and my son. My son is, he started in karting at 4. He's 6 now. And I watched him as he spun in a corner and backed into a barrier and saw his neck go flying back on those foam necks.
Right.
And, with karting, there's not as many avenues. You don't have a Hans device in a kart. You're not strapped into a kart. The very next day, I went and found the very best, as far as I could research, neck restraint system for karting. And honestly, motocross has been a huge boon to that, because I will tell you, karters don't really like neck braces, which is absolutely insane, because they think it limits their ability to turn around, see where other drivers are. And, my buddy that went upside down on top of a barrier, his neck was hurting for quite a long time, and he was not wearing a neck brace.
Yeah.
And, just makes it, again, one of those times where a couple extra dollars it's painful up front, but once you invest in safety equipment, it does last you a lot longer than you think it will.
I mean, yeah, even in my race car, I bought a nice seat, not the budget seats, just to pass. I bought nice harnesses. So, I have nice shoes now. Now I need to work on my suit and my helmet. So,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know my past history in cars. I've been on my lid in a tin top car as well.
Yes. Yes, you have.
And so yeah, that's safety is pretty important, but yet I still do all these sports. I question myself sometimes, but uh, I love it. And anybody else that, they get chills on their body when they hear old F1 sounds or, a V8 Camaro firing up. If you get those chills, or a K24 at full song, that if you get those, if your hairs stand on up, on your arm, you're going to be out doing these sports, and so you got to protect yourself.
Yep. So we got the helmet and some sort of neck device.
Motocross has developed that. Alpine Stars has. They're not attached to the helmet like you see in a Hans device. Really, they're just trying to prevent as much movement forward and backwards. Mm-hmm. And so you've got my 6-year-old here with a vest and chest protector on, with a this big motocross helmet, neck brace, and walking down. And he's a bit of a bigger boy. He's almost 60 pounds now, and at 6 years old, he might not have the burgeoning karting career because he's already overweight, but maybe that'll make him push harder.
Yeah, not everybody can be little pencils and stuff, so don't knock it. Let him still have fun. Let him develop some skills. Don't pull him out of it just because he's thick today. You never know. He could grow into it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I have a huge smile on my face. So a little context is my older son, when he was 4 years old, we started him in karting because I think the engineering and the work ethic that needs to go into a hobby for most of us. This is a hobby. This is not going to be a paying career. This is not even going to pay for a side hustle. I know we love our side hustles, but this is a hobby for most of us. And it has so much work ethic that you have to put into it. And that's what I wanted my son to know. I want him to know work ethic, and what he puts into it is what he's going to get out of it. He may be at the top of his class for weight, a little bit overweight, but what you'll find in karting and car racing in general is just that determination. I love watching all these documentaries of race car drivers. A lot of them had natural talent, but Con, have you heard of the new NASCAR series on Netflix? It's kind of a Drive to Survive kickoff.
Yeah, I was listening to Denny Hamlin's podcast, and he was mentioning it because I think they were following him for a little bit and a couple other drivers. So
yeah, he spoke on how he didn't have, or he felt like he didn't have, the natural talent that maybe many other drivers had in his class. And so he had to put more effort and more time into it. And, the results speak for themselves. I know he's chasing that elusive championship, but that he got to the highest form of circle track racing in the U.S. and many consider, the highest racing in the U.S. That's all subjective, right? I personally love IMSA and F1, and I'm loving NASCAR too. I'm down here in NASCAR country, and now they're doing some road course racing, and it all takes skill. At the end of the day, all of this takes a lot of effort and skill.
You better love NASCAR. You're racing at Trackhouse Karting Complex. Come on now.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You're going to run into Suarez.
Most of them don't know much about him.
You're going to run into Suarez and Chastain down there, I'm sure.
I believe one of the big driver, Kyle Larson, actually lives probably a tenth of a mile down the road outside of my neighborhood. So it's very much ingrained down here. Everybody's down past Kyle Busch Motorsports. Every time I'm driving to the go-kart track, you're driving past Multimatic down here in Mooresville. So you got a lot of used NASCAR shops, which comes in handy in builder class for car racing.
I could imagine. You can get all the tricks. I'm sure there's some retired, crew chiefs that would like to teach you a thing or two about circumventing the rules.
Oh yeah. One of my neighbors in an old neighborhood from where I just moved to, I'm talking to him nonchalantly. He saw my race car. So he kind of walked up to my garage, started talking, and turns out he was a crew chief for Le Mans 24-hour race. These are regular people. These are their careers. This is their normal thing. But, for those of us who didn't grow up in the middle of motorsports capital, it's just amazing to really realize all these guys they just went and did it. And, instead of getting an IT degree and going into consulting or government consulting, as we like to look at Washington, D.C., they went into motorsports, and it's really cool.
Yeah. So getting back a little bit on track, you talked about your son wearing a chest protector and rib protector, so like a vest setup. Is that? I'm assuming there's a suit also involved, and every time I'm cruising OG's website, I have to filter by go-kart shoes or non-go-kart shoes. So what's the difference in that type of equipment, like the suit, the shoes, the gloves, those kind of things?
Yeah, so if we focus on the suit first, is karting, you're thrown, we talk about no seatbelts, right? You're thrown from the cart or you kind of move with the cart. You're not attached to the cart. So you're not really worried about that cart lighting on fire and you being trapped inside it. So what you're finding is that a kart suit is made more for abrasion resistance versus a racing suit, which is nice and soft and made out of fire resistant materials. The kart ones kind of feel plasticky, a little bit more plastically, but at the end of the day, they're more abrasion resistant. Okay. I got a new suit for karting just maybe 4 weeks ago, and it already has a little bit of my on the back of my elbow where it rubs the engine, because that's where you are in karting. You are right next to that engine, and it's rubbing right next to where the chain guard is on a cart, and it's already rubbed halfway through on that cart. So I'll have to have that stitched up by my lovely wife, but. That's what's going to happen is you're going to have that happen. And so you've got your suit, you've got your vest, as we talked about, that vest and chest protector is protecting your rib cage. For the most part, that's where it goes around. It's for hits, but it's also for the G forces involved in karting. When you hit a curb in a kart, it does not have a suspension. And a lot of people think, that makes it simple. A kart's simple. No. It doesn't have a suspension. Well, the chassis is the suspension.
Yeah, that's not simpler. That's more difficult.
Yeah. So I'd love to talk about the suspension of kartings a bit, but sticking to, the safety gear first, you've got your chest protector, you've got that neck protector, you've got your helmet, you have shoes. It's the same thing between the suit and the shoes. Karts, you typically want a little bit of a firmer sole. So they're a little bit harder to walk on than even car racing shoes, where car racing shoes are very soft soles, and you can kind of feel a little bit more in it. Is kart racing shoes do have less padding, However, they're stiffer at the arch. And so you're getting more feel through it, but it's also stiffer. So it reacts a little bit better on the pedals. And, in terms of safety equipment, that's really all we're talking about in karts. You've got no Hans, you've got no harnesses, you've got a plastic bumper about 6 inches deep between you and another kart. And I will say it hurts. I had an unfortunate moment this weekend, actually. It was a busy day. It was a nice day down here in North Carolina on a Sunday, and we probably had 30 some odd karts coming out for Briggs practice, 4-stroke practice. So they split out the 2 strokes and the 4 strokes when we had a lot of karts out there. But we still had 30 some odd, people coming out, karts coming out of pit out. And kart tires are far more heat reactive. And how I say that is they need temperature. With a car, you've got a lot of weight to build heat into tires quickly, but a kart is only 150, 170 pounds plus however much you weigh. So adult, you're typically looking at your classes are anywhere between 325 to 400 pounds is typically the class weights. And that includes the kart, fuel, everything. That's everything across the scales with you in it. And so we've got these relatively big slicks compared to the weight on them. And so they are ice when you come out of pit out. And we had a 9-year-old kid that it was his first time out in his new cadet kart. And he spun at the front of this field. And I was working with a friend, and in karting, just kind of like Spec Miata, drafting is very important because there's no real aero on these karts. Your helmet's up in the big air, your arms are outstretched catching air. Drafts are big in karting, and so we were going to work on some drafting. And on that warm-up lap, you're trying to pour energy into the tires. So you're weaving back and forth. And my partner is right in front of me, and he jukes left. And I don't even think for a second about it, as, we're trying to just warm up tires. And by the time I really realized what's going on is he had juked out of the way to get out of the to narrowly miss this 9-year-old who had come to a stop right in front of me. And I crashed into him at I would say only about 2025. We were just coming out of pit out. And the people behind me said both karts went completely in the air, and it totaled that kid's kart. That was that kid's first time on his new to him kart.
Oh, wow.
And it completely destroyed that kart and did significant damage to my kart. And, my body racked forward and bent the steering rack itself, the steering upright in a kart. It bent it completely with the force of my body. And they are made to bend a bit in these impacts to absorb a little bit of energy, but you're still talking about a steel column that you are pushing against. And, I was only traveling 20, 25 miles per hour, and, it destroyed the kid's kart, put me in some serious pain this week. But that's all it took. He spun on the outlap, and we got 30 karts behind him, and people juke left and right, and blind hit, and it happens. And it's unfortunate on both sides. The kid was learning, and we all make mistakes. And then, it was unfortunate on my side. I was directly behind somebody. I was not paying attention to see if anybody was losing. I was just trying to get our way through the pack of 30 cars so that we could really work on our drafting. And I almost consider that a rookie mistake, that I should know better at this point in time. But again, we all make these mistakes.
2 rookies that poor kid should have been in the back of the pack, in my opinion. But uh, you know,
Yeah, I mean, and that's a good lesson for parents as well, and even not kids. Just somebody who's not as experienced is sometimes you realize you put your kid or yourself in positions that aren't ideal, and 9 times out of 10 they're perfectly fine, but all it took was him spinning on extremely cold tires and pit out, and that cost him a decent amount of money. The kid luckily was perfectly fine.
He won't be nearly as sore as you are anyway. He's a kid.
Yeah, I reached out. I didn't even realize, to be honest, it was a kid at the time. They don't really break out. Once you're out of kid kart, once you're out of 7 years old, you are out there with adults for practice.
Okay.
And so and because we're all in karts and there's a lot of small adults as well, you don't really realize sometimes when it's a teenager or even a 9-year-old out there. And, I thought it was just, I raised my hands. Luckily I didn't use any, serious hand signals, but I was pretty angry at the time coming off that warm-up lap, because luckily I could drive my kart back to the pits. But then I realized, as I pulled into the pits, I was like, wait, this is my friend's. It was actually the family of one of my friends that I kart with, and it was his cousin's son, and it took out his kart, and that ended their day. And of course, then they have to pick up a new kart and relearn a new kart. So it's not all sunshines and rainbows in kart racing.
Okay, so say, DJ, you just ran into my kart and I totaled it. How do I go pick a new kart?
Okay, so that's a great topic. I will tell you the wrong way first.
Okay, that's how I'll do it. So you go ahead and tell me, and I'll try to avoid that one.
New to kart racing, I went on Facebook Marketplace and bought what I thought was a stellar deal on a kart. And it was an older kart, and it was an older motor. And kart racing, I will say, when you first get started in HPD, you're typically taking a street car out there. And really what you have to worry about is tire pressures, making sure gas is in the car, and pretty much go. Are there tires on the car? It's good to go. You can take a street car out in HPD and go out there and be relatively reliable for a while. That's not the case with kart racing. You can't just take something and hope it'll work. And I learned that the hard way. Is one, it was an old chassis, which I didn't realize is kart chassis wear out because they use their chassis as a suspension as they wear out. So one, you're losing speed, which I did not realize at the time. But I also picked up what was called a Rotax. And it was a Rotax Evo, and it was a two-stroke non-water cooled motor. And I'm sorry, it was water cooled. And it requires maintenance. You have to clean the reed, you have to check the reed jets. You have to reed flaps. You have to clean out the jets in the car quite frequently. You have to pre-mix the oil. You have to watch your water temperatures. All these things that I had absolutely no idea what I was doing. So what ended up happening was I'd be working on this kart at the track and not getting in laps and just not doing it well. And so I got frustrated, and I bought a Briggs and I threw it on that kart thinking, okay, two strokes a little too much for me at this point. I just don't know what I'm doing. And all my friends were running, Briggs. So, they didn't know a significant amount about, two strokes. And, I got it running enough, but it was just unreliable and it wasn't working well. So I bought a Briggs and put it on this old kart chassis. And man, I went to my first race and I was utterly uncompetitive. I was just at the back of the pack. And at that point, I'd been running the rental league for a little while, so I thought I understood karting a bit more. And my buddy allowed me to jump into his cart during a practice day. And so I literally went out of my cart into his cart, and I jumped 1.5 seconds in lap time. And it was a brutal, slap to the face of, guess what, silly, you can't cheap out on motorsports, which, we know this. That's a lesson we learned in car racing as well.
Yeah, we know this, DJ.
Yeah, we know this, but we still do it every time.
Yeah.
So where I am now, I went to a team, and what's pretty cool about kart racing is there's for the most part, if you want a cart or cart parts, you're actually getting it either from online retailers or teams. And there's a lot of teams. And so these teams are either distributors or builders. So, in Trackhouse area, we're very lucky to have a retail outlet, a brick and mortar store for kart sport. And they carry Kart Republic carts. But you've got these distributors and teams that you almost kind of akin to those motorsports teams at the professional level in car racing, except this is karting, and they're a lot more approachable and a lot cheaper. And that's where you get your carts and your kart parts. So what I learned was most of these carts are very similar at the end of the day for pace. What really matters is support and the initial setup, because you can change so many parts on these carts to make the better or worse. An axle change, a caster change, a camber change. All these changes are very minute, but make massive differences in lap time. And buying into one of these teams that's with your local track or where you will be racing or what series you will be in is just so important. So you're really buying the support and the team and the speed more than the cart. And so if you were getting into the sport, I always highly suggest for showing up at the first couple races for wherever you plan to practice or race at, and look who is there as a team aspect for their carts. Because guess what? You're going to need parts and you're going to need support. And those teams will get you up to speed so much faster. Even if you buy a lightly used cart that is the same brand as what those other teams are running, it's at least going to help you. But again, you are not going to be as competitive as a brand new cart. And for that aspect, buying a 1 or 2 year old cart is probably your best bang for the buck. Buying a 10-year-old cart, 15-year-old cart is a bad idea. I have been down that path.
Yeah, I probably could have told you that beforehand, but it's the same actually in the circle track world. The chassis wear out because they flex, and so they start flexing too much and they stop turning as well. So it's a delicate balance, but I didn't realize there were teams. Are there like boutique chassis makers out there?
Yeah. So you've got a couple big players that make most of the carts. So when you look out there, you're going to see tons of different names out there, but there's really only a couple big manufacturers. You're talking about CRG, Kart Republic, OTK. These are big manufacturers that actually run a couple different carts under the exact same cart, basically. So I have a Maranello cart, which is the same thing as a CRG cart. It's just developed a little bit different, but it's the same basic chassis, same bumpers, same axle. Well, not necessarily the same axle. They can change the axles. But really at the end of the day, it's they're very similar amongst each other. And even all those top manufacturers, they've really, in the past 20 years, started to come to the same chassis designs. So there isn't necessarily a huge difference between them. You'll see, the boutique manufacturers actually doing bigger things that are radically different than the norm. But if you go to national competition, you're going to see, these big manufacturers, OTK, Sodi, and then you're going to see some boutique manufacturers such as MGM and Coyote. These are American-made manufacturers. So MGM here is in North Carolina. And so MGM is actually pretty strong down here. They're a very, very quick kart. I debated between MGM and Maranello myself, but why I decided on Maranello was one of my friends was running Maranello, and the owner of Prodigy Motorsports, who carries Maranello, shows up and runs a lot of the same events that I want to run. And that's really what made the decision at the end of the day.
I mean, when they're getting out there and they're getting out there where you're going to be, it's kind of a no-brainer. Even when you ran Spec Miata, the reason a lot of people like to run Spec Miata is because it's a big family that shares parts, right? Like, you're never going to be that far away from a part you need. And so it could be similar for karting.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're going to be going through a lot of consumables in karting, even more so. You talk about late models and circle track racing as well. There's the circle track karts almost as well. Everything flexes and ages out, and the kart gets worse at handling. Your wheels are aging out at a significantly faster rate than a car. Your axles are wearing out. Your seat is wearing out. Your seat is part of your suspension, and you are a part of the kart. And so that's, one of the things I'd like to cover real quick is, talking about the driving aspect of these karts as well. Looking at from somebody who wants to go kart racing, who's never driven, and then looking at somebody who's kart racing and going to cars, or even the opposite. I kind of made the opposite. I went kart racing first, and then I went to karts afterwards. Almost backwards, but I will say kart racing is some of the best, tightest form of motorsports that I've raced myself. And I will say they are the attributes that make you fast in a kart are not necessarily what will make you fast in a car. And I read a fantastic article talking about the Mazda program and putting sim racers and kart racers into their MX5 cups. And I'll present this question to you, Con. Did you think the kart racers were faster, or were the sim racers faster?
I'm going to go with the sim racers.
So you'd be correct. It was the simulation racers who actually had higher pace than the kart racers. Huh. You're talking about kart racers who've been racing from 5 to 15 years, 16 years old when they're looking at these MX5 cups. And yet these sim racers who may have been only racing on a simulator for 3, 4, 5 years are able to put in faster lap times than these karters. And you're going, well, how? And it makes sense at the end of the day, because kart racing is very different than car racing. You've got a solid axle suspension back there. You are using the chassis as a suspension. So your approach to corners and is much different in a car than a kart. What I was blown away, a concept that I was blown away by is, in a kart, on the entry of a corner, you are supposed to be lifting wheels. And so what they call it is jacking. Right. Is the kart is supposed to pick up that inside rear wheel to be able to get the cart to rotate, because the cart doesn't have a differential. So if you try to turn with two locked rear tires, it's not going to want to turn. So the cart, as you turn, and the caster and the flex of the suspension lifts up that inside corner wheel, it lifts it up and it lets the cart turn. And what that does is it makes your approach and your exit to a corner just so much different than a car. We've always learned, and somebody gave this to me actually recently, rainbows. Think of every corner as a rainbow. Is a good way to show it to your kids. Is we're so used to making that arc in a car because your acceleration zone is done through a differential. And so really, when you're trying to put down power out of a corner onto the fastest straight, you are trying to square it off a little bit, but at the end of the day, you're still turning a little bit. You're using that steering wheel a little bit and being on the throttle. Well, turning a steering wheel and being on the throttle in a kart is wasted energy because it's dragging. It's dragging the corner. You can actually sit in a cart and have somebody push you from behind and turn that steering wheel, and you will almost come to a complete stop. And so you have to square off corners just so much more. You have to get the cart rotated so much earlier than you would in a car. And you can't think of driving out of a corner with a cart like you can with a car. And I struggle with that. That's something that I am working on actively. Is there is a corner at Trackhouse that is the quintessential, most important corner before the longest straight. And I can't get it right because I keep falling back to my traits in a car where I'm like, oh, well, I'll approach it with a little less entry speed and get a better drive out. Well, that doesn't work because what happens is I'm overslowing on entry, and then I'm trying to get on the throttle while I'm still turning and letting the cart roll all the way out to the exit of the corner. And all it's doing is just not accelerating. And I do that. And I realize I'm doing it, and I still do it. And that's just something that it made me aware how much karting is not car racing. You learn so much racecraft. You've got immense amount of even the racecraft is different between karting and cars. You're using your bumpers a lot in karting. You're squaring off people. You're nudging them. You're moving them out of the way. These are all things that, as a tin top racer, is just so heinous. If you're pushing me out of the way with your Civic Con mid-corner, I'm going to be pretty upset at you by the time we get back into the pits. But in karting, there's an art to it. You're not punting somebody, you're moving them. And there's a specific art to it. In fact, they had to come up with a specific device to try to help curb this. So on most of these competitive, what we call CIK carts, so the carts that go left and right at these tracks, is on the front bumper. Is the bumper has clamps, and it's providing friction on basically a slide on the front of these carts. If you hit somebody too hard, what's going to happen is your bumper is going to get pushed in. And that is a instant penalty for those drivers. So it's trying to help curb that. Now, whether it works all the time is up for debates forever on social media and the forums and everyone you talk to. But it was an attempt because the amount of moving and physical driving in karting is just so much more than you would find in a car race. But I urge everyone, try every different type of motorsports. I did autocross competitively for quite a number of years. I did road racing competitively. I've done karting, or I'm trying to get better and be more competitive at kart racing. And every single one is fun in a different way. And hopefully I can be competitive in a car and a kart this year, but we'll see how that goes.
Yeah. So I'm down a rabbit hole. This whole podcast thing is a very selfish endeavor of mine. I just happen to share it with the world because I figured it's the only way I would get people to actually talk to me is to have a platform. So I have one, but really everything's selfish and stuff. But so I've talked to, at this point, by the time this one goes out, I'll have one that goes out that talks about dirt circle track racing and how it applies to road racing. Because I talked to a guy who's one of a handful of people who've raced cars in all 50 states. And to do that, to attempt that challenge, he's had to rent circle track cars just to get it done. So we'd had that conversation. And then I had a conversation with another Madison Motorsports member who races motorcycles just to see, and he's done HPDEs just to see how, well, one, how to get into racing motorcycles and doing track days on motorcycles to help learn and educate people who want to do that. But also, if you already have a motorcycle like me and you want to go out there, and what can I learn? What will I learn on the motorcycle that will impact me on the racetrack with my Honda Challenge car? So I've been sort of going down that rabbit hole. But it doesn't seem like there's much that's going to translate from what you're saying, karting to the race car.
Well, there is. At the end of the day, it's just like you jumping on, Mario Kart is there will be things you learn about racecraft, and it helps with your technical mind, thinking about how tires work. And so whenever I am, I coached a lot for, drivers back in NASA, and I am attempting to coach in karting. Is what I would say to every single person trying to learn to get faster in any type of motorsports is to forget setup, forget the best, forget what others are doing at that moment. When you first get there, all I want you to learn is how does the tire and the steering wheel work under you? Because at the end of the day, all of these motorsports, there is one thing touching the ground, and that is the tires. And if you can't feel where the grip is in a tire, then you are just driving to a track, you're driving to a setup, you're driving to a car. That isn't, it may make you fast at one track. It may make you fast in one car. It will never make you a fast driver. And I think that's where you see the greats, F1 drivers, the rally drivers. All of them have such an immense feel for what the car is doing. And they can tell you what the car is doing is through those tires. And so whether it's kart racing, whether it's sim racing, whether it's dirt track, whether it's rally, is you're getting a sense of feeling for that tire and what I call grip. Grip is such a terrible nomenclature, but you're trying to get what you feel out of that tire and where the tire is happy. And that it takes a long time, and, different cars and different tires and everything will all be different. But once you start to get that feel, then really what you're learning is how do I get to that best feeling? And then you can start doing setup changes, because then you're going to say, oh, that setup makes the tire feel really good and it's working. And then when you jump into a different car, it's not, oh, I have to hit this marker and turn in here and do this, is instead you jump into the car, go run a couple hot laps, and you go, okay, here's where the tire is happy. And you start driving more and more towards where the tire is happy. And that's, I hate to self promote, but one of the things I've always been told is I'm a very quick track learner and car learner. And that's because I'm driving to the tire. I'm not driving to the track. And I have so much to learn. I need to be a lot better in karting and car racing, and I have so much to learn as well. But I do come up to speed in these cars, in these motorsports quickly, just simply because I'm driving to that grip level, and I at least have a basis to get started before somebody who's just used to a certain car setup.
Okay. I think I make changes, at least to my car. Well, one, I know when my front tires hate me. I mean, it's a front wheel drive McPherson Strut car. So they scream early. So making changes to not have them scream is where I was aiming for. And that's where I found it to feel the best. The whole car feels better that way. So,
yeah, I mean, you're working on it. Every time you get it out there, you're getting a better feel for the car and the tires. But I would say if you could, Con, we've known each other a long time, so I'll say this to you personally is get out there and try to not necessarily go fast, but go just drive, get into a rhythm, get the feel of the car. And I always tell people, whether you're in your practice laps, out there, or your qualifying lap or a race, push. Never go out there and just run under your tire's limit. If you're running under the limit, you're never learning where the grip level is. A car that is perfect at 95% pace could be atrocious at 100% pace. And you're never going to know that unless you're pushing everywhere.
I completely agree with you. My asterisk mark to that is, if you're scrubbing in a fresh set of tires, don't do that. But it's a mantra that every time you go out, you have to have something to work on. We're racing. We're not going out to do parade laps. This is not HPDE. We're not taking a break. We have to get out there and push every single lap. And we have to find our weakness, the car's weakness, the combination between the car and ourselves where we're terrible together, and then figure out how to get around that. And you're only going to find that is when you're pushing the edges, so.
I know, I've known guys that have gone pro and just focused on running good, consistent laps. And they jump into a cart that's a car or a vehicle setup that is not what they're used to, and they struggle because all they learned to do was drive to a pre-described set of circumstances, and that doesn't help them out as they're going. With Honda Challenge, you've been a Honda driver, but you've also changed, significant chassis changes. As you moved from an older platform to a newer platform, and that introduces some nuances. And I'm sure as a tinkerer, I think you're actually on a higher level of tinkerer than me. You love to change setups. You love to see what works or not. And I like to come home and tinker. And I think setup changes are your forte.
Oh, yeah. I've been accused of always having another setup change. I do it methodically, so it's one change at a time. It's comparable to data, those types of things. So, but the accusations aren't exactly accurate because I we race in the Mid-Atlantic region, and I don't make a change between VIR and Summit because I want the data to be validated at both tracks that we primarily run at because of the differences in corners. So as long as the data provides the same increase in speed, then I'm okay with the change. But if it works at one and doesn't work at the other, I'll try to find a better way to make the change. So it's just something I do. But
well, the cool thing about karting is that it's at such a more accessible level. And I'll offer this to you, and I've offered this to a lot of my friends, is when they come down, is go take it out. What's really cool about karting is, yes, you can mess up chassis pretty quickly, but if you go to your local track and you get a 2-3-year-old chassis for $1,500, $2,000, throw a Briggs motor on for $600, that and your entry fees are going to be the most expensive thing until you try to win.
Right. Okay. So let's talk finances a little bit, though. So you said the entry, primarily you want like a 1 or 2-year-old chassis, but what's a good range to look for a price in your chassis?
So I would as I spoke to before, you want to stay away from 10, 15-year-old chassis that are $1,000, bucks and below. They may seem really tempting, but another $500 to $1,000, yes, I know that's double the cost, but will get you into a kart that is going to be consistent and something you can work with going forward. So really, if you're looking at a 4-stroke or Briggs LO206 type chassis, you can find them all day long on Facebook Marketplace with motors on them and ready to go for $2,500 to $3,500 for a good, consistent kart. And why I say to buy one with a motor already on it is it just simplifies things. As a rookie, you don't know what you don't know. You don't know about chain tension, about how to keep chain tension on these, because there is no tensioner as we would have in a car. It doesn't auto tension. You have to set the tension. The location of your axle is fixed, so you're moving your motor, and it's not just fixed front and back, but also that sprocket can slide on the axle, or the axle can slide itself in the housing, laterally. So you can lose that chain tension. So if you start with a setup that's been consistent, and again, stick with a kart that you see multiple people running at the track, and go to a couple races, because one race may, have an abnormal turnout. Go to a couple. See what's out there, see what's running pretty good, and approach a couple people. Most of these people who are racing karts have 3 or 4 karts. I currently have 4 karts, and I'm just getting into it. Now I do have 2 karts for my kids, right, but I have 2 karts myself, and I'm just getting into it. So, a lot of these guys that have been racing for years have a chassis that's 2-3 years old, and they're willing to sell at a heavy discount. That chassis is $4,000 to $5,000 new. And, the motor and getting it set up and everything is another $1,500 to $2,000, at the Briggs level. And you can find that all day for $2,500 to $3,500 for something that's 1, 2, 3 years old. And it will be competitive. It's really that last 2/10, which is a lot in karting. But you could be well mid-pack with a kart that is $2,500 to $3,500. As long as you can drive, that's where you can. And then when you're getting started before your first race day, let yourself go do some practice. All these tracks that are outdoors typically have practice days. If you're lucky enough to live in Ohio or North Carolina or Florida, you've got a couple options. If you're in somewhere like Virginia, you're a little bit more restricted. You'll have to travel a little bit. I know in Washington, D.C., you have to travel, about an hour north to hit a good outdoor track out there that'll let you run an owner kart. And it's called owner kart. But it's relatively cheap. So Trackhouse is about $50 during the week to run all day. That's the hours are typically 10 to 7 o'clock at night. Trust me, you won't be able to run that long. But what's cool is you can take as long as you want. Is if you're going to if you took the day off work, you can just do a setup change and lounge around for 30 minutes and then jump out on a session and then come back and take your time. Really at the end of the day, when you get started, you're going to get maybe 30 minutes of track time before you are completely smoked and useless in that kart. And that's being generous. So listen to your body, let it recover. And if you're at one of these good facilities, Trackhouse has an entire garbage can, and not can, but a full dumpster of used tires. So what happens is a lot of these racers will run the tires for one day, or oddly, if they have a practice and then qualifying, they might throw out something with only 2 heat cycles on them and throw them in the dumpster. And that dumpster is open for people to grab and use as practice tires. Don't be afraid to go jump in and get a couple. And as with anything, don't put a setup on a cart based off of used tires, especially unknown used tires. But if you're just out there to learn the sport and to go have fun, you can run on free tires for as long as you want. And the tools to mount these tires, you can be as simple as a $90 scissor tool, or get really fancy with a $300 manual tool. And then, you have some teams that have these, actual tire machines, but really you don't see that often. I use a $300 manual thing that I can literally pop off and change a set of 4 tires in probably 8 minutes, 10 minutes. And that's, undoing the bead locks and unmounting the old tires and popping the new ones on. So it's a lot friendlier for mounting costs than, the tires you would have in a car. And if you're in a class like Briggs, your consumables are so low. The amount that you're going through brake pads is just, I can't tell you what the brake pad depth is on my kart, and I could easily tell you that on my race car, because you have to watch it. But on my Briggs, I'll probably put on a new set of pads, probably every 2 seasons. And, obviously depends on how much you're running and fuel cost. On a Briggs, you're running 87 fuel, and you can run gas station fuel that is ethanol free. But if you're going racing, they do dye the fuel. So if you're going racing, use the fuel at the track, and it is a bit more expensive at the track, but you're really not using much. A full day of practice, 20, 30 minutes, you're probably going through about half a gallon to maybe 3/4 of a gallon of fuel as a beginner in a day. So you're not using much fuel. And even when you go racing, you might use a gallon of fuel, by the end of the day. You're really not using much fuel in these karts. Now, the 2-strokes are much more, since they make more power, they're very much hungrier. And you can get stuck with something like a X30 or KA that can run on a premium fuel at 93, 95, 98. But the track only, at Track House, you have the options of either 87 or 110. And that 110 is $13 a gallon. And you burn through it pretty quickly. Not like a car, but you got through it pretty quickly. So, that's why I always suggest kind of, getting started, go do a Briggs. And if you buy a 2-3-year-old cart for $2,500, if you buy a good example for $2,500 and you run that for 2 seasons and sell it for $1,500 to $2,000, that's really, that's so cheap to go racing. If you think of most forms of motorsports, that's the cheapest way to go. And even just, you'll spend, if you've looked up the cost of video graphic cards lately, you're going to spend that much on a graphic card for a computer to go sim racing.
What's the?
It is for the cost of owning a cart for 2 years. So it can be done cheaply, and you will be a solid mid-packer even with one of those carts if you can learn to drive. Now, once you're ready to take the next step and get into a brand new cart and have a good setup, you can spend that money. I'll go ahead and be transparent. I spent about $6,300 on my Briggs cart. By the time I got a new chassis, got all new fuel line hoses, wheels, a new Briggs motor, and I had it gone through by Stewart. Stewart is our local engine builder. He's known for his white covers on the motors. But he will buy a brand new motor, run it through on the dyno, go through any little tricks that he can, run it on the dyno again, and set your cart up. And I think even with the GoPro muffler, which is a little bit more than most standard tracks, I was out the door for $1,400 for a motor package. Okay. Brand new, long block, everything that he went through his magic as well. And so I spend a little bit more because I have gotten to the point where, I can afford something a little bit nicer. And so I don't want to be working on an unknown chassis. But that is to say that I got spoiled with car racing. And so that seemed cheap to me.
Oh, yeah. It's not that bad. My thing was, you talked about digging through the dumpster for tires. What's a new set cost, DJ?
That is also a great thing about kart racing. So a brand new set of adult MG Reds, which is what you use for most classes at Track House, a brand new set is $224.
So 4 tires for $224.
4 tires.
That's cheaper than one
4 tires
RR.
Yeah, exactly. And they're a harder tire, so you could run them a very long time. There's people that use them for 4 or 5 races. Really, if you want to be winning in these ultra competitive classes, you're going to be buying a set, either once a weekend if it's a long event, or if it's a short event, you can use that for 2 weekends, race pace, and then relegate it to practice duty. But the relative cost compared to car racing is just, I dread buying my first set of Hoosiers this year for my race car, because that's 10 sets of brand new tires for my cart. And it makes you question yourself and what you're doing. But we wouldn't be in motorsports if we were the best at budgeting.
Oh no, I'm good at budgeting, but I'm also good at making sure every dime is used.
Yeah, well, if you want to have fun, it's going to cost money. It's just, if that's what you want to spend money. Some people go on vacation, some people buy fancy new Porsches, and some people buy new tires for the race cars. And that's it's great having that choice. We can do what we want. And the tires are much cheaper, but yeah, as I said, you could run those MG Reds for a very long time if you wanted to, and Vega is different. And what's kind of cool is some of, if we get back to the cost of running a kart, some of the entry fees actually include a set of tires in their entry fees. So a recent how we have NASA and we have SCCA, CKNA has really come up recently for the Briggs class, the 4-stroke class. And they're very popular, and they have a Spring Nationals coming up here at Charlotte. So it's already sold out in most classes. And they have a cap of 50 in masters and I believe 80 in senior classes. Can you imagine 80 karts starting at the same time? And every single one of these classes is basically sold out aside from Cape Kart, which it's just, that's 5 to 8 years old. So you're not going to get as many in there. But their entry fee is basically inclusive of tires. And so you're spending $500 for practice on Friday, a bunch of practices on Friday. You got to practice Saturday morning. You got qualifying races. You've got qualifying, you've got heat races and a race on Saturday. Then you have races on Sunday as well. And that's all for $500, including a set of tires. So that's a lot of good track time and a lot of good racing for the bang for the buck.
Yeah, that sounds like it's a great deal in the long run.
Yeah, and that's a national event, Con. That's not a local track. So I just signed up for, in February, our local track house has what's called a karting challenge. And they have, I believe, 10 events through, 10 race weekends through the year. And for a practice, a qualifying, a heat race, and then the final race, the entry fee was $80. And that's it. And then, they don't include tires as part of their package because it's not a national. But it's $80. You go to the movies, with your significant other, that's going to be $80 right there. So it's, if you look at it from buying a 2-3-year-old chassis, and running tires for, 3-4 weekends, as long as you don't want to be first place every time, you can really be a solid mid-pack with a very minimal budget and have a lot of fun out there.
Sounds awesome. You're a salesman, DJ. You should, somebody should give you a commission.
Well, one of the things I've always been told is I'm very forward and passionate about motorsports. I just love motorsports, and I could talk forever about motorsports and cars. I love it. And I hope other people have this passion as well, because why else are we here on earth if not to enjoy ourselves? And if we're going to be spend all our time and effort into a hobby, you might as well be passionate and love it. And, so I hope that comes across to other people and not just being loud, but I have been called loud. So I will accept that and understand that it's my passion.
Awesome. Jess Fitzpatrick, you are a saint because you have 3 children. That's what I'm going to say right there. Putting up with DJ and the boys. Yeah. And being so supportive. So, you and I are both fortunate to have supportive spouses. So,
and it's very family oriented. When you can go to, what I really like is if you go into, and this is kart racing as well, but even more with kart racing, is you go to these tracks and it's family teams, because typically you've got the younger kid that's racing, and then the dad's racing, and then maybe even the grandfather is racing as well. There are 56-year-old drivers. I don't know how they do it, because I'm 36 and I feel like I'm falling apart in a cart, but they do it. They're used to it. But they're all there to support each other, and they're all there to have fun together. And so it's so amazing that I can go do a sport with my child where I'm an active participant and he needs me to be involved as well. So it's not like you're sitting on there yelling at your kid from the sidelines and, basketball, you're there, you're working on their cart. They're asking you questions. You're asking them questions. You're probing them, figuring out what's going on with the cart. So you develop a deeper bond as a family out there. And I'm very lucky to have my wife who's just so supportive of it and absolutely loves doing all of these motorsports with us. And I will forever remember these weekends that I'm spending with my son. And I've told him, I've been straight up with him, the moment you stop having fun, we're not going to do this. And as long as you keep that in mind, that it's for fun and it's for spending time with your kids or spending time with yourself, and you're supposed to be having fun because that's why you're spending money. That's, as long as you keep it to that, you're going to create great weekends and great memories. And people talk about cars as fleeting and money is fleeting. Well, memories last forever, and you're creating memories doing these things. So it's worth every penny.
I can't agree more. That is the key. Create those memories, because they will last much, much longer than anything we have in the house. We joke in the race car world, the car is replaceable. It's absolutely replaceable. You're not replaceable, but the other thing that's not replaceable is your friendships, your family, and the time you spend together with them. That's what we live for. That's what we work hard for Monday through Friday. So we have the expendable income, we have the time, and we can go and make memories with our family and friends.
Yeah.
So,
well, whether it's NASA racing, which I absolutely love and suggest with anybody with a love of cars, get NASA racing or go-kart racing, it's either one is just such a great exploration. If you don't do it now, when are you going to have time to do it? You got to do it, now. You got to live while you can live.
Absolutely. DJ, thanks for coming on the show, man. I'm sure we'll talk later because you still have a crazy GTS build that we need to talk about. Maybe just GTS in general, because I haven't covered it as a class, so I need to highlight it. I don't know if you have a couple GTS buddies you want to have invited on, and you can explain GTS and all the gnarly things you guys can do as builders to German cars. But yeah, that's in the future.
Yeah, Oh, 100%. I think I tend to blow some people's brains when I say I'm putting an automatic in my race car. So that's always a fun discussion.
All right. Well, you have a good evening, man. I really appreciate the time.
Thank you for having me on. And if anyone has any questions, again, I said I'm so passionate about this. Obviously reach out to Con, but reach out to me as well. Reach out to your local people that race. Everybody wants you in. Bigger fields are more fun for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely.
Until next time, keep working on yourself, keep working on the car, and let's get faster.